Welcome. A week from today will be Tainus Esther and the onset of Purim. And therefore, we're going to start learning today about the story of Purim. Not just the story, but some of the deeper lessons, the explanations about the Megillah. And then we'll get also to, in later classes, to the halachas of Purim, the minhagim related to Purim, and so on. We know that Esther was the queen of Achashverosh, not something that she was looking for. It wasn't something she ever hoped or dreamed to be, but Hashgacha Pratis is divine providence. That's what was wanted. And really against her will, and by the instruction of Mordechai, she ended up going to we'll call it the contest. She's chosen, and she becomes the queen. And as a result of that, or thanks to that, through her, the miracle of Purim transpired. What's the problem? What's the source? What's the beginning of this whole situation? So Haman, as the Megillah tells us, came to Achashverosh and said, you have Am Echad, you have a nation among you who is mefuzar or mefeirad, spread out, separate among the entire kingdom of Achashverosh. They're all over. Their laws, their customs, their way of living is different, and they don't follow the king's ways. And therefore, it's not worth to keep them. And if the king is pleased with my suggestion, let's perish. Let's kill them all. Wipe them out. And you should write a decree saying to do so. And in addition, I'm also going to give the king 10,000 gold coins. Silver coins. Okay, the king likes it, goes for it, and the decree is put into place. Now, the Gemara in Masechta Megillah Daf Yud Gimel Amud Beis talks about this and tells us what does it mean what does it mean that their laws, their the way they behave differs from all the other people. The Gemara says they don't eat from the same type of foods that they eat. And they don't marry from them, meaning they're not going to eat Persian food. They're not going to marry Persian women. They don't have any of us to marry them. They're different. This is what the Gemara says is the definition that daseyem sheines mikolam. It's food and it's in the way they get married. Not only that, as daseyem melech einam esim, they don't do the laws of the king. For example, they say, we don't want to work. Somehow they manage a whole year not to work. Haman tells Achashverosh. Here they say it's Shabbos. Next week it's Shabbos again, then it's Pesach. They have all these different reasons why they're not working, right? Friday, I got to stop early. Shabbos, I'm not coming. And before you know it, it's a Yontif. And they're not following the king's rules. And they're not going with the general way of the people that live here. There's no point. Let's get rid of them. Not only that, but there's no point, it's not worthwhile, no use for the king to let them be. Why? Because they eat, drink, and disgrace the throne. The Gemara explains, what does this mean? One of these Yidden, let's assume that you're drinking, and a fly falls into your cup of wine. You'll flick the fly out and drink the wine. You have no problem with that, as long as the fly is out. But if Achashverosh touched your cup, the whole wine is thrown out. You won't even sip it. So you see, when it comes to their own way, they don't mind. The fly a hin, a fly a her, it's okay, we'll manage. But if you touch their wine, they don't drink it. And what's the background to this? You know, Shulchan Aruch tells us that stam yenam, wine of Evdei Kechavim, we'll call them idol worshippers, is prohibited to have any benefits from. And not only that, but if they touch our wine, if it's not mevushal, then there's a gzeira, we have a decree, that maybe in their mind they wanted or they intended to use this for idolatrous reasons, and therefore we say you can't drink their wine. So Haman comes to Achashverosh and basically says a very logical argument. Listen up. You have a group of people that you benefit nothing from them. They don't contribute to the economy because they barely work. They're very separate from everyone else. They don't benefit the culture, the society of Persia and all of Ahasuerus' kingdoms. And this is something which, unfortunately, Seina Yisrael, the enemies of the Jewish people, have been saying these types of arguments throughout the years. That the Jews are different, they behave differently, they don't act, they don't mingle with us, they don't blend with us. They think they're better, they're different. You find this by the Romans. One of the arguments that some of the philosophers of the time had, that the Jews are dividing us because they have this, they're segregated, they have a separate, everything is separate, the way they do it, differently.
In Rome or in
Rome, wherever the Jews were. The Romans were talking about that. And they went so far to say that whatever we hold sacred, they hold profane. In other words, what the Romans consider to be holy, the Jewish people consider that to be impure. Okay. Whatever we say is allowed, they say it's prohibited. It's a constant issue going on here where it's not, they're not blending with us, they're working against us. Makes no sense. For example, the Roman philosophers said that the Jewish people considered it a crime to kill any newborn infant. Okay? In the Roman culture, if somebody was born with a defect, they would kill the child. There were different types of groups. Some wouldn't actually go and kill the baby, some would just leave it out as if it's not killing, put it in a flower pot or let birds take it, whatever it was, but they would not go actually and kill it. But it's basically murder. And the Jewish people never did such a thing. We cherish every life, regardless of its mental state or physical state or so on. And God forbid to say it's not worth living. But the Romans did that. And the Romans were complaining, look, the Jewish people, they say it's bad to kill infants. If they're not perfect, there's something's wrong with them. Okay, let's go back to the story of Purim. So as a result of Haman's speaking, arguing, complaining about the Jewish people, as a result, they now have Ahasuerus goes ahead with the decree, and he says he's doing it. He's going to wipe out. He's going to issue this decree that on this day next year, any person could kill any Jew, which basically means that wherever Jewish people were living, on the same day, the locals could go and kill them, no problem. Now, through a turn of events, as we know, Esther comes to Ahasuerus, and she saves the day. Now let's study a little bit what Esther said. They have this feast, second feast with Haman, Ahasuerus, and Esther. And Esther says, listen, if I find favor in your eyes, the king, and if the king so pleases, give me my life and my petition, and for my people grant their request. Essentially what she's saying is, I'm Jewish. We were sold. We were destined to be killed and wiped out. And if you were selling us as slaves or as servants, I'd be okay with it. I'd be quiet. But, because you don't lose anything out of it. But here, you're going to wipe out the Jewish people. It's a big loss. So number one, I am Jewish. And number two, there's a monetary loss. If you would sell everyone as slaves, at least the king would gain something, which is way more than the 10,000 silver coins that Haman is offering to Ahasuerus. And if you think about it, Esther is not answering any of Haman's complaints. Haman came with logic to Ahasuerus. Haman said, you have a group of people among you they're not worth it. They're bad for the kingdom. They're separate. They don't respect what we respect. They don't eat what we eat. They don't work half the time. And what does Esther come? She doesn't come and say, actually we do. We do benefit from us. We do pay taxes. We do work. We actually are very cultured. We're adding to society. Nothing of that. She says, by the way, I'm Jewish. And by the way, if you would sell us, you would make more money than this whole 10 thing. So please, let's wipe out this decree. Why doesn't she try to answer or disprove Haman and his false accusations against the Jewish people? Because Achashverosh, maybe a bad person, maybe not, but he was acting on something which is logic. Right? Haman came with a logical complaint. Jews are bad, eliminate them. Achashverosh bought it, and he set out a decree. If you want to undo that, you undo the argument, get to the bottom of it, and undo it. So before we look at why Esther answers this, let's look at a similar accusation, or another accusation against the Jewish people in the year 1240. This was by Louis V, the king of France. And the story behind this, there was a man by the name of Nicholas Donin. He was a Yid, Jewish person, who unfortunately converted to Christianity in the early 13th century in Paris. Now, Rabbi Yechiel Miparis, who find him from the Bali Tesis, what's supposed to be done. If heaven forbid there's a situation where someone has to be excommunicated, and he excommunicated from the whole community. Now, after living for 10 years and still keeping to Yiddishkeit, this went, and he converted, he was baptized in the Roman Catholic Church, and he joined the Franciscan order.
He excommunicated him after he converted?
No. Whatever the reason was, he excommunicated him. So he was excommunicated, and he lived alone for 10 years, and then he went and he converted to Christianity. Now, his first act of retaliation was to stir up bands of crusaders, to perpetuate massacres where thousands of Yidden were killed. Okay, actually, 3,000 were killed and 500 accepted the alternative of baptism, unfortunately. But in 1238, Donin went to Rome, and he presented himself before the Pope, and he denounced the Talmud, the Gemara. He brought 35 counts, 35 articles that he wrote up, where showing that stuff that says in the Gemara is bad, it disqualifies, disproves, and really negates a lot of the things they believe in, which obviously it does. And therefore, it's a bad thing for the church. And the Pope, he was persuaded by all these accusations, and he went and he said, we have to get rid of all of these Talmuds. Okay, get rid of all of them, confiscate them, and so on. Now, for the most part, his order was ignored. People didn't really listen to him. Governments didn't really pay attention. Get rid of the Talmud, don't get rid of the Talmud, except in France. In France, in March of 1240, the Yidden were threatened with death. They have to turn in all of their Gemaras. Now, back then, the Gemara was not printed on a shelf or published. You could just buy it. It was handwritten. So the Gemaras, the Shas that they had, were manuscripts. You can imagine how long it takes to write, and copying from one to the next, and so on. Now, after that, Louis V, after everything was confiscated, he ordered 4 of the most distinguished rabbis of the time. One of them was Rabbi Yechiel Miparis, to Moshe of Kutri, Yehuda of Milan, and Shmuel ben Shalom of Chateau Thierry. And they have to have a public debate with this Donin about Yiddishkeit. Now, this was a person who used to be frum. He was religious, and he was learned, and he really knew his stuff. And now he converted out, unfortunately, and he has an agenda to destroy Yiddishkeit, and he brought about the killing of thousands of Jews. And they have to publicly debate him. Now, these type of debates, even if you win, you don't win, okay, because of the power that the church had, and so on. Now, although they managed to positively defend Yiddishkeit, even until today, those that study the debates see that the answers that they gave were good answers, and it was all resolved. But nonetheless, they still enacted a decree to burn the Gemara. And on Friday, it was June 17th of 1244, 24 carriage loads of these handwritten manuscripts of Gemara were burnt publicly. Terrible, terrible thing. Now, one of the texts that this Nicholas Donin cited to prove that the Gemara is bad says like this: Tani Reb Shimon ben Yochai learned, HaKosher shebegoyim b'shas milchama haroig. Even a good non-Jew, even a good Gentile, at the time of war, killed him. And he said, look, what's happening here? The Jewish Talmud is condoning killing innocent people just because they're not Jewish. Time of war, kill them. Now, the answer that he gives in the Eitzer Vikuchem, he brings it and he says that the Apikaires Danin was screaming and shouting that you guys are wicked. You say to kill Jews. You say to kill Gentiles just because they're Gentiles in the time of war. Your sages said, "Teiv shevigoyim haroik." Good among the Gentiles you should kill. Now, the Rav that was arguing back said, one second. You're so wrong in your interpretation. And let me explain to you what it means. Look at what the Pasuk says in Tehillim. Hallelujah, Hashem kol goyim. David HaMelech says that all the goyim, all the Gentiles should praise Hashem. We're not saying that they're bad. There's good goyim. There are also bad ones, as it says, they forgot God. Kol goyim shichei elikim, forgetting Hashem, but they're good ones and they're bad ones. And he brought him the Medrash from the Chilta. The Medrash says that when the Jewish people left Egypt and they were coming towards the Yam Suf, Pare had a change of heart. And he went out with animals, right? Horses and so on, to go bring the Jewish people back. The Medrash asks, where were their animals from? All the animals died during the plagues in Mitzrayim. Nothing left. Which animals did they use? The Medrash tells us they were good Gentiles who believed in Hashem and believed in Moshe, and they said, we're not taking any chances. And they brought their animals inside. And the animals that were brought inside during the plague of hail, even before then, by the death of the animal, some of the animals, they brought them inside, they were speared. So they were good Egyptians who put their animals inside, their animals survived. These good, quote unquote, Egyptians, when Pare said, let's go get the Jews back, they said, great. And they gave their animals to go get them. So here you see, it's a time of war. There's a challenge with getting the Jewish people back. They have no animals in Egypt. And all of a sudden, these good people are willing to give it. So he's explaining what the Gemara says in a time of war. It means be careful because there are certain people in a time of war, you can't trust them. Because at the opportunity to go against the Jewish people, they might do it. And then it becomes the issue of self-defense. Because Rebbe Chilaf Paris said, if someone comes to have a war against you, he wants to kill you, you have a mitzvah to go first to kill him before he does it. It's self-defense. We're not coming and saying, oh, because you're not Jewish, you're bad. It's a time of war. And they're collaborating. So out of self-defense, you have to do it. That is the answer that he gave him. So let's step away from this a second and compare the great debate of 1244 and the story of Esther in the Megillah. Rabbi Chilon Paris and the other three great rabbis that were answering this heretic, Nicholas Donin, they were arguing his points. He brought arguments why Yiddishkeit is bad. He brought complaints against the Talmud, and they went through each one of his arguments, and they debated it, and they disproved him. Esther Amalka doesn't do any of that. She just says, I'm Jewish, by the way. Who cares if you're Jewish? If they're bad, how does that change? Oh, if you would sell us as slaves, I would keep quiet because at least the king wouldn't lose anything out of it. Why don't you try to explain why Haman is wrong? Not about so because you're the queen, therefore you're a good person. So there's a Farbrengen of Tafshin Chav Tes Purim, very long Farbrengen. Rabbi Farbrengen for I think over 4 hours on Purim. The Rebbe spoke about this, and the Rebbe said, "Look at the silence towards Haman's arguments. Esther doesn't address it; she doesn't deal with it. Sometimes arguments are answered with answers; they're refuted with good answers, good explanations, counter arguments. But there are certain beliefs that don't require any type of dialogue. You don't have to disprove them in any way, because reality does the job for you." And Haman's complaints and allegations against the Jewish people fell into that category. Because Esther was beloved by Achashverosh. Achashverosh knew her well. He chose her from among thousands of girls. She lived in the palace and had certain behaviors, certain ways that she was conducting her life. And All Esther had to do is say, 1 second, you believe that guy about the Jews? Look at me. I'm Jewish. And just the fact of saying, look at me, this is who I am. I have nothing to explain. I have nothing to hide. I have nothing to disprove. How many Jews do you know? You know one Jew? That's me. And look at me how I behave. And do you know me to be any of those things that he's saying? Am I different? Do I behave bad? Am I some kind of bad for society? Am I a separatist? Am I divisive? None of that stuff. All Esther has to say, I'm living my life properly. That's the answer. I don't have to argue with some Haman guy. And that worked the best. As soon as Achashverosh understood that Esther is Jewish, was the end of it. And if he's offering you money and that's why you're considering it, you're losing more money on this end. That's what she said about the selling of as slaves. It's not even a good deal. In other words, I'm not arguing with you that we're different. We are different. I'm not arguing with you that our laws are separate and we don't keep what you say we should keep and the wine and whatever else. We don't work on Shabbos. It's true. All these things are accurate. But it has no negative impact on the kingdom. Because look at me. I'm an example of that. Why did the people, the Yidden of that time, why did they deserve to be punished in the first place? Shimon Bar Yochai says that the reason why, he asked his Talmidim, Talmidim asked him, Talmidim of Shimon Bar Yochai asked him, why did the Yidden deserve to be punished? Shimon Bar Yochai said, you answer that. And they answered, because they ate from Achashverosh's feast. And the Rebbe says, what does it mean they ate from his feast? They were trying to assimilate and be like the Goyim. Because Haman and his men are saying that we are not friendly to society, that we're different, that we stand out, that we're Jewish and all that stuff. They said, okay, let's change that. Let's go and eat from his feast. Let's hang out with all the important people in the capital of Shushan. Let's blend in, and we'll avoid anti-Semitism, and we'll stop the hatred against the Jews because they hate us because we're different. Let's try to be more of the same, and we'll solve the problem. And this is something which not just the Yidden of Shushan said, despite Mordechai's begging them not to, but this is something which people have said throughout the generations. We're different, that's why they hate us. Stop trying to stick out. Just blend in, be like everyone else. If you do it quietly. Hide your Yiddishkeit. Don't be so proud about it. You're sticking it to them. It has a bad effect. And the Rebbe says it's exactly what Esther did, complete opposite. I'm not answering anything. I'm not disagreeing with you. We are different. In a good way. We don't work on Shabbos. We don't eat the type of food that you eat. We're not trying to blend in. This is who we are. We're proud of it. That's the best way to answer back all of these types of arguments. The Rebbe applies it to today's day and age. A person has a challenge to give his children proper Jewish education, to make the right decisions and actually do things differently than his neighbors, and sometimes very differently than society. And you should know this is the best way to counter anti-Semitism. This is the best way to overcome the challenges, is by being more Jewish and by being more different, not hiding it. And this is why we had such a miraculous decree, such a miraculous turnaround, because we fixed the problem of the Yidden of Shushan. Their issue was trying to blend in, eating from the Suda. And Esther's behavior, representing the Jewish people, was the opposite. We're not blending in. We're Yidden and we're proud of it. And this was the answer then, and it's the answer today, and it's the answer in all situations. Don't hide who you are. Don't suppress your existence. Don't try to put away your identity. But be proud, be loud. Okay, for joining.
She recorded Jesse James.